Something is happening in Cleveland right now, and it doesn't fully make sense. At first, it looked like a normal off-season. New energy, quarterback competition, fresh opportunities. The kind of situation where everything is wide open and players are expected to come in, compete, and earn their spot. But then, things started moving differently. You've got reports saying players haven't even been consistently in the building yet. Coaches making it clear that real football activity hasn't even started. Everything is supposed to be early, controlled, still developing. And yet, at the same time, we're seeing something completely different unfold. Out of nowhere, you've got Deshaun Watson working out with Jerry Jeudy down in Florida. Not later in the offseason, not after things ramp up. Right now. And that's where people started paying attention. Because in a situation that's supposed to be an open competition, where every quarterback should be trying to build chemistry, earn trust, and establish their presence, why does it feel like certain connections are already being formed? Now, to be clear, nobody is saying players can't train together. That's part of the game. It happens all the time. But when you combine that with everything else going on, the uncertainty, the mixed messaging, the sudden shift in how certain players are being talked about, it starts to feel like there's more beneath the surface. And fans are noticing. Because one minute, it feels like the future is being built around younger quarterbacks. The next minute, you're hearing that Deshaun Watson might still have a real shot to take over again. Same situation, completely different signals. So now the question isn't just who's going to win the job. It's bigger than that. What direction is this team actually going in? Because if things are already moving behind the scenes, then what we're seeing right now might not be a true competition at all. It might just be the beginning of a decision that's already been made. It all started with one clip, and honestly, it didn't look like much at first. Just Jerry Jeudy out there working, running routes, getting reps in. Pretty standard off-season stuff, but then people noticed who he was working with, and that's when everything changed. Deshaun Watson, down in Florida, throwing together, building chemistry. Now on the surface, that might not seem like a big deal. Players link up all the time during the off-season. Quarterbacks and receivers working together, that's normal, that's expected. But the timing, that's what made people pause. Because this isn't late in the off-season. This isn't after training camp battles have already been decided. This is right before everything officially starts, when the Browns are supposed to be heading into a wide-open quarterback competition. And yet, it already feels like something is forming. Think about it. Coaches have already said there hasn't been consistent presence in the building yet. Real football activities haven't even begun. Everything is still in that early phase where nothing is supposed to be decided. So why does it feel like certain connections are already being built ahead of everyone else? That's the question fans started asking immediately. And once that question hits, it spreads fast. Because now, it's not just a workout anymore. Now it looks like alignment. Now it looks like preparation. And for some people, it even looks like positioning. Now, to be fair, there's no confirmation of anything deeper, no official statement, no clear indication that this means more than just off-season training, and it's important to keep that in mind. But at the same time, people aren't crazy for noticing the pattern. Because in a true open competition, you'd expect everything to be balanced. You'd expect all quarterbacks to be building chemistry, connecting with receivers, establishing timing. Instead, what people are seeing is one specific pairing, getting ahead of the curve. And that's where the speculation begins. Some fans are already wondering, does this mean something behind the scenes? Is this just coincidence? Or is this the early sign of a direction the team hasn't officially announced yet? No one knows for sure. But what's clear is this: that one workout changed the conversation. And it might end up meaning a lot more than people Because like we said, there's nothing wrong with players working out together. That's normal, that's part of the game. But the context around this situation is what makes it different. You've got a team publicly saying this is an open competition. You've got coaches explaining that real evaluations haven't even started yet. And at the same time, you've got Deshaun Watson already building chemistry with one of the top weapons on the roster. That's where the disconnect starts. Because if everything is truly even, if this is really a clean slate for every quarterback in the room, then why does it feel like certain relationships are getting a head start? That's what fans are picking up on. And once you notice it, it's hard to ignore. Now again, to be fair, there could be completely normal explanations. Maybe it's just convenience, maybe it's just timing, maybe it's nothing more than two players getting work in during the off-season. But here's the thing. In a situation, this sensitive perception matters just as much as reality. Because when you have multiple quarterbacks competing for one job, especially when one of them represents the future and another represents the past, every little move gets analyzed. Every detail starts to mean more. And this particular move, it feels early. It feels intentional. And for some people, it even feels strategic. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything shady going on. It doesn't mean decisions have already been made. But it does open the door for speculation. And right now, that speculation is everywhere. Some fans are starting to wonder if this is just natural chemistry building, or if it's a sign of where certain players stand internally. Others believe it's just being overanalyzed like everything else in the off-season. But either way, it changes how people see the competition. Because instead of feeling completely open, completely balanced, it now feels like certain pieces are already starting to fall into place. And once that perception sets in, it's hard to reverse it. So even if this was just a simple workout, it doesn't feel simple anymore. It feels like the first hint that something behind the scenes might already be moving in a specific direction. And this is where everything really centers, because sitting right in the middle of all this is Shedeur Sanders. Now here's the thing. When you look at this situation purely from a football perspective, it shouldn't even be this complicated. You've got a young quarterback who came in and actually showed something, not just flashes, but results. He stepped into a tough situation, handled pressure, and most importantly, he won games. Late in the season, when things could have easily fallen apart, he gave the team a spark. And usually, that matters. Usually when a young quarterback shows that kind of resilience, that kind of composure, you build on it. You give him momentum. You let him grow into the role. But here, it feels different. Because instead of that momentum carrying over, it's like everything got reset overnight. Now suddenly, he's back in the same conversation as everyone else, still needing to prove it, still being questioned, still being evaluated like he hasn't already put anything on tape. And that's what fans are struggling to understand. Because if you compare situations, it doesn't feel consistent. You've got other quarterbacks in the room dealing with injuries, long gaps without playing, or uncertainty about their level of performance. Yet somehow, the one guy who actually showed something recently is still being treated like the biggest question mark. That's where the frustration comes from. Now, to be fair, the team has said it's an open competition, and technically, that's the right approach. No job should just be handed out. Every player should have to earn it. But at the same time, past performance usually matters. And right now, it feels like that part of the equation is being minimized. Some reports suggest the team wants to see more consistency. Others say they're still evaluating everything before making a decision, and that's reasonable. But fans aren't reacting to the idea of competition. They're reacting to how uneven it feels. Because when you combine that with everything else, the workouts happening elsewhere, the shifting narratives, the sudden reappearance of other options, it starts to look like Shedeur isn't just competing on the field. He's competing against the perception around him. And that's a completely different challenge. Because once perception enters the equation, it's no longer just about what you do. It's about how what you do gets interpreted. And right now, that might be the biggest obstacle standing in his way. And this is where everything boiled over, because not everyone is staying quiet about this. You've got voices starting to speak up, and one of the loudest reactions came from Rizzo. And he didn't hold back. Because from his perspective, this whole situation doesn't make sense. Not just a little confusing, but completely backwards. His argument is simple. How is Shedeur Sanders not already leading this race? Think about what he pointed out. You've got a quarterback who came in late, didn't have the benefit of full preparation, didn't get all the early reps, and still found a way to win games. Not meaningless games either. Important ones, division matchups, situations where the pressure is real. And he delivered. Meanwhile, you've got other quarterbacks in that room dealing with serious injuries, long layoffs, and question marks about whether they can even return to form. One hasn't played consistently in years. Another is coming off major physical setbacks. Yet somehow, we are still acting like this is completely wide open. That's what triggered the reaction. Because to a lot of people, it feels like common sense is being ignored. Now, to be fair, competition is part of the NFL. Nobody is supposed to just walk into a starting job without earning it. That's how the league works. But Rizzo's point isn't about avoiding competition. It's about recognition. It's about acknowledging what's already been shown. Because if winning games under pressure doesn't move you forward, then what does? That's the question he's really asking. And that's why his reaction resonated with so many fans. Because it wasn't just emotion, it was frustration built on what people feel is a clear inconsistency. Now, not everyone agrees. Some believe the team is doing the right thing by keeping everything open. Others think it's too early to make any decisions. But what can't be ignored is this. The reaction is getting stronger. Voices are getting louder. And the more this situation drags on without clarity, the more it feels like something isn't being fully explained. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about who might be good. It's about who already showed something. And right now, a lot of people believe that's being overlooked. And just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more confusing, it did. Because out of nowhere, the biggest twist drops, and it completely shifts the conversation. Jimmy Haslam steps in, and what he says, it catches everyone off guard. Because now, suddenly, Deshaun Watson isn't just on the roster anymore. He's not just a backup option. He's not just someone trying to recover and figure things out. He's being talked about as someone who has a real chance to start again. Let that sink in. Because not long ago, the narrative around Watson felt completely different. There were serious doubts, questions about whether his time in Cleveland was even coming to an end. Some even believed the organization had already mentally moved on. But now, it's like that entire storyline just flipped overnight. And that's what's making people stop and look twice. Because when ownership speaks, it's not just noise, it's direction, it's intention. And even if it's not a final decision, it tells you what's at least being considered behind closed doors. Now, to be fair, there's context here. Reports suggest this could simply be the team keeping all options open, not committing too early, not closing the door on anyone, especially a player they've invested so much into. And that makes sense on paper. But in reality, it complicates everything. Because now, instead of a clear path forward, you've got mixed signals. You've You've got a young quarterback who showed promise. You've got a competition that's supposed to be open. And now you've got ownership stepping in and putting a spotlight back on a veteran with a very uncertain future. And when all of that happens at once, it creates confusion. It creates doubt. And more importantly, it creates tension around what this team is actually trying to do. Because now fans are asking a different question. Not just who's the best quarterback, but who does the team want to be the quarterback? And that's a completely different conversation. Because if Watson is truly back in play in a serious way, then this might not be as open as it's being presented. Or at the very least, it means the decision isn't nearly as straightforward as people thought. And that changes everything moving forward. And this is where everything starts to feel inconsistent. Because the biggest issue right now isn't just what's happening, it's how it's being talked about. The narrative has completely flipped. Not long ago, the situation around Deshaun Watson was being described in a very different way. There were real doubts, real concerns. Even the organization itself had hinted that things hadn't worked out the way they expected. People were calling it what it was, a failed move. But now, that same situation is being reframed. Suddenly, it's not about what went wrong. It's about what could still happen. It's about opportunity, a chance to return, a possibility of reclaiming the starting job. Same player, completely different tone. And that's what's catching people off guard. Because nothing major has changed on the field yet. There hasn't been a comeback performance. There hasn't been a stretch of dominant play that forces the conversation to shift. The only thing that's changed is the way it's being presented. Now, to be fair, there are reasons this could be happening. Some reports suggest this is about protecting the investment. The Browns committed heavily to Watson, and walking away from that completely isn't simple. Financially, it's complicated. Structurally, it's difficult. So instead of closing the door, they're leaving it open. And that's understandable. But here, where the confusion comes in, if the situation hasn't actually improved yet, then why does it feel like the perception of it has? That's the disconnect. Because on one side, you've got younger quarterbacks trying to prove themselves, fighting for opportunity, being evaluated on every little detail. And on the other side, you've got a veteran whose narrative is being softened before he's even shown anything new. And fans are noticing that gap. Now, this doesn't mean anything is guaranteed. It doesn't mean Watson is going to win the job. It doesn't mean decisions have already been made. But it does raise a question. Why does it feel like the standard is shifting? Because when the story around one player changes this quickly, without anything concrete happening on the field, it makes people wonder if the evaluation is really about performance, or if it's about something else entirely. And that's the part nobody has fully answered yet. But as this continues to unfold, that question is only going to get louder. Now let's slow this down for a second and actually look at the reality of Deshaun Watson. Because when you strip away the headlines, the narratives, and everything being said right now, the situation is a lot more complicated than people are making it seem. First, you have to start with availability. Watson hasn't played consistent football in a long time. Injuries have been a major factor, serious ones. We're not talking about minor setbacks. We are talking about significant physical issues that have kept him off the field and disrupted any kind of rhythm or momentum. And in the NFL, that matters. Because quarterback isn't just about talent. It's about timing. It's about reps. It's about staying sharp week after week. And when that gets interrupted for long stretches, it's not something you just flip back on overnight. Then there's the performance side. Even when he has been on the field, it hasn't looked like the version of Watson people remember. The consistency hasn't been there. The impact hasn't been the same. And that's part of why so many people believed the team was ready to move in a different direction not too long ago. But here, where it gets even more complex, there's also everything surrounding the situation off the field. Without getting into specifics, it's been a lot. A combination of factors that have added pressure, attention, and distraction to an already difficult situation. And when you combine all of that, you don't get clarity, you get uncertainty. Now, to be fair, there are still people who believe he can bounce back. Some reports suggest that if he's healthy, if he finds his rhythm again, there's still a version of him that can compete at a high level. But that's the key word, if. Because right now, nothing about this situation feels guaranteed. And that's what makes his presence in this competition so difficult to evaluate. On one hand, you've got a player with experience, with past success, with a ceiling that we've seen before. On the other hand, you've got a lot of unanswered questions. Health, consistency, fit. All of it's still up in the air. So when people hear that he has a real chance to start, it doesn't feel simple. It feels risky. Because this isn't just about what he was. It's about what he is right now. And that's something nobody fully knows yet. Which is exactly why this entire situation still feels so uncertain. And this is where the situation really comes down to one simple question. What direction are the Browns actually trying to go? Because when you look at everything happening right now, it feels like the team is stuck between two completely different paths. On one side, you've got the past. Deshaun Watson represents that, a player the organization invested heavily in, a move that was supposed to define the franchise. And even now, despite everything that's happened, there are still signs they're not fully ready to walk away from it. And that's understandable to a degree. When you commit that much, financially, structurally, emotionally, it's not easy to just reset. There's always that thought in the back of your mind. What if it still works? But then there's the other side. The future. Players like Shedeur Sanders, and even guys like Dylan Gabriel, represent something different. A fresh start, a new timeline, a chance to build something that isn't tied to past decisions. And that's where things get complicated. Because those two directions don't really align. You can't fully invest in the future while still holding onto the past at the same time. At some point, a choice has to be made. And right now, it feels like the Browns are trying to balance both. Some reports suggest they're keeping Watson in the mix because of what he could be if things go right. Others believe the real focus is on developing a younger quarterback, even if that takes time. But the problem is, trying to do both creates uncertainty. Because if you lean too far into the past, you risk delaying the rebuild. And if you move too quickly into the future, you risk giving up on something you already invested heavily in. That's the tension. That's what we're seeing play out right now. And it's not just affecting the team internally, it's affecting how everything is being perceived from the outside. Because fans can feel it. They can see the hesitation. They can see the mixed signals. And that's why this conversation keeps getting louder. Because this isn't just about choosing a starting quarterback. It's about choosing an identity. Are the Browns trying to fix what didn't work before? Or are they ready to move forward and start something new? Because until that decision becomes clear, everything else is going to feel uncertain. And when you step back and look at everything, this isn't just a normal quarterback competition anymore. It might look like one on the surface. You've got multiple quarterbacks. You've got off-season workouts. You've got coaches talking about open competition, all the usual things you'd expect at this stage. But underneath all of that, something feels different. Because this situation isn't assessment to a decision that the organization is still dealing with. A player who, if things somehow work out, could change everything, but if they don't, could hold everything back. And then you've got Shedeur Sanders, a player representing something new, a fresh opportunity, a chance to move forward without being tied to what didn't work before. Two completely different paths. And right now, it feels like the Browns are stuck right in between them. That's why everything feels so unclear. That's why every move, every workout, every comment, every report gets magnified. Because people aren't just watching to see who wins the job. They're watching to see what the team actually believes in. Now, to be fair, none of this is decided yet. The real competition hasn't started. The real reps haven't happened. Coaches haven't made their evaluations. There's still time for everything to play out the way it's supposed to. But perception, that's already forming. And once perception sets in, it becomes part of the story. It shapes how players are viewed, how decisions are interpreted, how every success and failure gets judged. So the biggest question moving forward isn't just about performance. It's about clarity. At some point, the Browns are going to have to show what direction they're truly committed to. Because trying to balance the past and the future at the same time, that only works for so long. Eventually, you have to choose. And when that moment comes,